Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Konstantinos Foutzopoulos. The name implies, I'm Greek, and as a Greek, I couldn't speak about the ocean without remembering that our philosophical, commercial, and even political imagination started on the sea. As the Homer in the epic journeys of Odysseus sees, the history of the world is written actually on the water. And today we are again in a similar situation where new maritime domains are reshaping the global dynamics. Last month, we saw, for example, that the IMO for the negotiations for the net zero shipping failed, but at the same time, countries like India, South Africa, Kenya, Mauritius, that we have here with us today, are investing heavily in maritime infrastructure, and a new maritime map is emerging. As we said, the countries are investing in resilient corridors, new ports, undersea digital infrastructure, localized shipping, and sustainable blue industries. We can speak about a blue renaissance, as the session title implies. And it's more than an economic shift. It's how we reimagine a world where the maritime domain will help in sovereignty and opportunities across the waters. I will not take more of your time because we have 4 exceptional speakers with us, and we would like to leave also some time for the audience. I will start with a question for all the speakers to give a broader geopolitical framework before we move to more in the countries and their respective regions. As traditional trade routes face growing pressure and new maritime corridors emerge, do you believe that the next phase of globalization will be shaped by ocean routes linking the world's emerging regions? I will start with our speaker from Kenya, Ambassador Nancy Gargitu.
Thank you very much for the question. And let me stand on established protocols, but of course acknowledge Mr. President and thank him for the support, actually sitting here with us, and all the speakers who have gone before us, particularly the last panel that has really entertained us and made us our full stomachs. Now we could, there was no digestion blockage of the brains. Now, yes, there are new corridors shaping because I think the previous corridors were set, particularly from our region, Africa and the rest of the world, based on resource extraction and usage from, in wherever place they were going. But we want to say that today we are experiencing corridors that have been stable for a long time, getting flashpoints, sudden and intermittently, that are very expensive. And we have seen that the logic and the costs cannot be sustained anymore. Then, of course, the way they were established did not maybe take care of the South or the developing countries, and therefore it is imperative that we come up with a new model for business, because even the way they've been established, you could say they've not been equitable in terms of the South getting value, and somebody said about inequality and not being responsive to the people of the South. And we see that those costs, what we've been working on has been just-in-time principles of cost saving and efficiencies. But now we need to think about just-in-case, because the costs are enormous. Rerouting of trade, very essential trade, causing delays to very essential, important and essential commodities, like in the manufacturing sector, electronic, the automotives, which cannot be sustained. For example, if you look at 2021, the blockade on the Suez Canal, 6 days at $9.6 billion a day, that's not sustainable. So even if they were efficient in terms of being short and quicker, that can no longer be sustained because of the loss that comes from the blockade. The geopolitical tensions also that flare up and cause, just suddenly, without planning. So we need now to come from that model to the model of just in case and reshape how we see ourselves doing business. The other thing to look at is the climate actions, which also are, costing trade a lot of money in terms of weather, sea rises, disruptions in the ports, and figures have shown that the kind of impact it's causing on trade, like $7.5 billion affecting 200 to $450 billion worth of trade. That's no longer sustainable. So it's not a question of if and why and how, but reality tells us that we need to think outside those traditional ways of doing business and coming up with more resilient, more responsive corridors. And for now, the best we can do is South-South triangular cooperation. So working together, we can redraw those corridors and maps for the continued mainstay of the trade, because we know the global economy cannot do without shipping. 80% carriage of goods. We cannot afford not to be proactive and think ahead. And like I have said, use a model of just in case, because it's the way business must be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And from Kenya to India.
Namaste, President Becky. It's a particular honor for me coming from India to be speaking before you, sir, because there are two monumental agreements that were signed. There is only a single G2G agreement between India and South Africa on merchant shipping, which was signed in the year 2006 under your presidency. And as Ambassador mentioned, we need trilateral agreements. So we have a unique model where India, South Africa, and Brazil have a trilateral agreement on maritime transport, which again was signed during your presidency, sir. So it's an honor to have your continued guidance and to be able to speak in front of you here today. Now, talking about the overarching keyword for our panel was globalization. And shipping has been the integral driver of globalization. Fundamentally, what globalization meant was the place of production and place of consumption need not be co-located. Something can be produced thousands of miles away and yet can be consumed at a very different part of the world. So this global economics was driven by shipping. Shipping also shouldered a big part of the economic progress that the world has seen over the last 500 years in particular. We definitely learned a lot about how powers have shifted from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, now to the Indo-Pacific. Some of the panels that have come before us spoke about this transition. But one transition I wanted to draw attention to is when it comes to globalization, particularly in the context of resilience, what we are seeing now is for a continent like Africa, which is resource rich, traditionally, the business models have used Africa as a provider of resources where it would get shipped out, as mentioned by Ambassador, processed outside, and then would be exported to Africa at a premium. That's an exploitation, economic exploitation, which is invisible. Now, one form of globalization that is definitely happening is the processing is now moving to the continental Africa. And that definitely is going to reshape some of the shipping corridors that we are familiar with. Second, we all have a very landlocked view of the world, particularly people from the global south. Now, this could be a factor of many things, but what I am given to understand through some of the readings in my conversation, colonization had a role to play in detaching communities from their maritime heritage. That's true for India, and I believe to some extent true for South Africa and many other African nations as well. We need to reimagine our economies, reimagine what we do in the context of this heritage. We need to build a national consciousness for oceans. The third point I wanted to make in my introductory remark is, if I was to ask this wonderful audience to name the neighbors of South Africa, and you are most certainly going to tell me the land neighbors for South Africa. Never in your wildest imagination you would say India. We are neighbors, we just separated by a little water. I mean, little is to your imagination, but we are neighbors, and if you start seeing India and South Africa, or India and continental Africa, or India and Mauritius, my panelist here is from Mauritius, you will start thinking of the possibilities differently. We may not have answers to all problems, bilateral problems, opportunities, but you would still feel more closer to your friends in South Africa, your friends in India. So with that, I'll hand over to the moderator.
We go directly to Maurice.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, for being with us this evening. And I wish to also say thank you to ORF for its amazing Cape Town dialogue, and to Becky Foundation and the President for gracing us with his presence, time, and patience. And first of all, for believing that dialogue and conversations can still shape, influence, and transform things for a better future. So I want to say, before jumping into the main question, that I come from a small island developing state, as my panelist from India said. Mauritius, we are just a tiny island in the Indian Ocean. Well, we just have a total land area of only 1,979 square kilometers, which I think is even much smaller than Cape Town. However, our EEZ, which means our exclusive economic zone, is of 2.3 million square kilometers, making it the 5th largest EEZ in the world. Moreover, we share management responsibilities for an extended continental shelf area of 396,000 square kilometers with the Republic of Seychelles. And I guess you must all have heard about the controversial and territorial fight for Mauritius, which is like the fight of David and Goliath, like a small island fighting against huge states to get back its territory. And that's exactly what we embarked on, to get back our territory, which was the Chagos archipelagos. So now, after a long battle and struggle, and with the support of the African Union, the EU, the UN, and many of the countries here in this room, it has become a reality. And I want to take this opportunity to say thank you. And yes, with the restitution of the Chagos archipelagos to Mauritius by the British, our EEZ will now be one of the most expansive of the planet, I would say. So now, of course, when we're talking about globalization, as Mr. Paras said, the first question is what we understand by globalization. So for me, if you ask me how it shapes maritime trading, shipping routes, the corridors, and how is it impacting on us, especially small island developing state, first I would say what globalization means. Globalization means connecting, collaboration, and of course, dialogue for a better world. And as you said, like having access, and irrespective of physical boundaries or borders, having access or inclusion should not be a problem. So to reply to the question, I would say yes. So we need first and foremost to reckon that yes, our future, if we talk about maritime frontier and this redefining of a blue, as we call it, it will be exactly harnessing the resources from the ocean, as we say, churning the ocean to extract what we call the elixir, which is so indispensable right now to our future. So I want to say that Mauritius, being a it has its own vulnerabilities, like most seas do, like rising sea temperatures, acidification, coral bleaching, and if it rains consecutively for more than a week, we might even disappear. So that's just the extent of a threat. But we are very strategically positioned. So being based in the Cape of Good Hope and also being, I would say, like a gateway or bridge between India and the rest of the world and Africa and Asia, we can become, I would say, a regional hub of choice. So with globalization, I want to see and focus on the positive sides of it. And I would say SIDS become, I would say, the first, like they sit on the front line of emerging new routes, of new shipping corridors. So hence, they can leverage, and Mauritius being strategically positioned in the Indian Ocean's busiest, I would call it, east-west shipping lane, it can become a blue connectivity hub that links Africa, Asia, and the wider Indo-Pacific. So what I mean by globalization, I would end on this, I know my time might be over. I want to believe that globalization means strategic collaboration and not isolation, that it means new partnerships in terms of infrastructure, be it for the ports, logistics, bunkering, surveillance, data infrastructure. Third, skills transfer, capacity building. And fourth, of course, I would say collaboration to become a green port of choice. And for that, we need the much talked about financing. Thank you.
Thank you. And with skills and capacity building, we can proceed with Nobisa.
Thank you very much. The nice thing about speaking last is that everyone else has covered what you wanted to say, so I will not be long. I would like to acknowledge President Beki, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, as well as the ORF, and appreciate the invitation to this gathering. As it was emphasized last night, as well as in the G20 summit, that there is a new world order that is emerging with a shift of the nexus of power. And that brings about new opportunities, and part of that includes the new routes that we've just spoken about, taking into account also the geopolitics in the Suez Canal. So countries need to position themselves for these new opportunities, especially South Africa, which is strategically located in the south and however has not fully exploited its blue economy. So we need to position South Africa as a southern hemisphere gateway. That comes with the strengthening of our port systems. We've got this very strong port system. We've got 8 commercial ports. There's going to be a 9th one in Bohoba in the Northern Cape. However, there are inefficiencies that come with that. So we need to, as a country, to look at that and address that and prepare ourselves for these new opportunities that come with the new maritime corridors. The second point I want to make, the green corridors that are coming up with the maritime decarbonization, we need to prepare ourselves for that in terms of making our ports ready to be green fuel hubs, as well as meeting the green port standards. So I will stop there. I will not, I think everyone else has covered what I wanted to say, but I wonder, the key message I want to put across is that this new world order is challenging us to strategically position ourselves, our countries, especially the coastal communities, the coastal countries, to be ready for these new opportunities in maritime corridors.
Thank you very much. And since we have with us 4 countries that represent different but at the same time similar values and ideas, and there is a form of cooperation at various levels, I would like to go into more detail in each country, and we'll start again with Kenya. Kenya has championed a vision for Africa's blue economy. What forms of cooperation do you see, Ambassador, with cooperation with India, cooperation with the broader Indo-Pacific, but even inside Africa itself as more essential in order to unlock maritime potential and at the same time build resilient and modern coastal infrastructure?
Thank you for that question and for the comment about Kenya. Let me start by saying that the blue economy was not always one of our focus areas of development as a country, based on our historical development, again, because the emphasis was on the port as a point of extraction, of export of resources, and therefore that model remained for a long time until the government realized that no, this is no longer sustainable, and we needed to have a holistic view. And one of the things that happened was the realization that even our governance structures, being historical, were all wrong, and they were not addressing the issues, because we found that we ran a government with different silos that did not address the blue economy as one industry, but looked at it as disparate components. For example, when we did an analysis, we found that maritime policies were present in like 22 different government ministries. Because when you think about mining is a standalone mandate with a different ministry. Then education, you're talking of maritime education and training and capacity building for the maritime sector. It's in the Ministry of Education that basically emphasizes more on terrestrial, but not. And even environment, with our National Environmental Management Authority, different components dealing with different ministries dealing with different components of the maritime economy. And therefore, the first thing we did was to try and bring coherence and make sure that there was communication between the ministry, because we want to be a blue economy country. And that's one of the beginning points. And we had a national conversation. And we all met and decided what is it we want from the blue economy. And it was surprising that when we did our first conference, even the president was shocked, because the interpretation of facts he had been given, but now coming from the sector, for him to see a different picture was very shocking. And therefore, one of the things that he did was to create a voice for the blue economy. And he created a structure, or rather a state department within government to deal with that. And that has gone up now, it's now a ministry. And the point I'm driving is, if it was a problem within one country, how much of a problem is it within, for example, this continent, if we are not talking to one another? We share the same ocean. He just told us we are neighbors. The oceans make us one. And therefore, if we are talking about about making it work for us, then we must collaborate. We must partner, and we must speak with one voice on what we want to get out of the blue economy. We are a young continent, young people looking for opportunities, young people looking for economic validation, and young people who think that, or rather, you can't blame them, that the lack of economic space is a lack of democracy, and therefore makes them agitated. And we cannot raise, or rather, we cannot make the blue economy work for us unless we work in collaboration and in partnership. Let me mention one or two of the areas where we must. We've heard from morning that we are a continent of enormous resources, especially in a time where the shipping or the maritime industry is looking to transit, and the resources that will help us do that are right here on the continents. But where is the money? Where is the technology to do it? We can't do it alone, and neither can even the global north or other parts of the world, the blue economy, do it without our resources. So what do? You cannot have an industry, one global industry that works in silos. For example, when the ships from the developed world that are transition ready coming to our shores, what will they find? So we must work together to make sure that they find the facilities that they need on or in our ports. Where will they bunker? Will they find shore facilities for green energy? And the workers who are attending to them, will they understand? So we cannot afford right now to be isolated or to work in isolation. We must collaborate, exchange technology, and such. And also, when you think about Africa itself, a continent that has not yet reached the level of industrialization that we find in other parts of the world, we have an opportunity to leapfrog. We don't have, what is it, to modernize or to remove or to, we can just leapfrog into technology, into industrialization, into also the skills that are needed. And I think that's what I want to say. So from us as Kenya, we'll say that we cannot do it alone. No region can do it alone. We need each other, and we must find the synergy in which to work together. It will be cheaper, and it makes sense anyway, not to struggle. Thank you.
Thank you. And talking about synergies, I want to go back to Paris and India, because India is investing a lot. Is investing in shipbuilding, in digital maritime infrastructure, in green ports, in many things. And how do you see the role of India and the Indian model with a focus in innovation, sustainability, self-resilience? How could that model help also the aspirations of Africa?
Initially, I mentioned about consciousness, and I try and take every opportunity to tell people and try and connect them to the ocean. So one thing I can give to this audience is, when you leave from this forum, just remember, no shipping, no shopping. That's how integral the shipping industry is to our lives. It moves 90% of global trade, commerce, and it's also one of the oldest known profession to mankind, along with agriculture. So shipping has been there for the last 5,000 years, and it will be there no matter what number of industrial revolutions come and go. That said, it's very recently that India tried to go through a shipping renaissance of ourselves. Last 10 years have been unpredictable, or I think I choose a different word, unprecedented, in terms of the reforms that we have undertaken back home, realizing that as trade increases, as manufacturing increases, as India is more connected with the world, and the more we are exporting, we were able to find one Achilles heel. Most of the goods that India was shipping out and importing in was moved on foreign vessels. Now, as we continue on this path of something we call the Amrit Kal, the next 20, 25 years of our growth story, we wanted to work on that Achilles heel and reimagine India as a maritime power. That said, I'll just give a brief overview of some of the initiatives that we have taken, and something which we could probably look at replicating or adapting to the African economies, depending on their vision. The first thing that was clearly established was political leadership, and it started from the very top. We set for ourselves a grand vision. We call it the Maritime India Vision 2030 and a Maritime Amrit Kal Vision 2047. 2047 is when we complete the 100 years of independence. India has now prioritized shipbuilding. Shipbuilding, for people not aware, is called the mother of heavy industries. Automobile is the mother of small industries, and shipbuilding is the mother of heavy industries. It's also one of the most labor-intensive industries to invest and prioritize. So it's something which some of the African economies may like to consider. Second, we have initiated creation of something called as a Bharat container shipping line. One challenge that often comes up in my conversation with my African colleagues is there is no direct service between India and Africa. So tomorrow, if you want to increase trade between India and Africa, it still moves somewhere in Middle East, then it'll go down, which adds to the cost. We want Indian goods to be available in South Africa as cheap as possible, and South African goods to be available in India as cheap as possible. So what we are doing is we are creating a dedicated shipping line based out of India with enough container moving capacity to facilitate, one, the resilience, because it'll be India owned, but also to service some of the routes which are of national importance to us and to our friends. Finally, when we talk about reforms, a good policy is the first step towards good process. So in the last 10 years, we have completely revamped every single legislation that governs India's maritime sector, where as of today, we have no pre-constitution act on our statute for our sector. It's been a long journey, and of the 15 or 16 principal acts which govern our sector, which includes the merchant shipping, the Indian ports, the coastal shipping, 5 have happened this very year. So it's taken enormous political will, political leadership from people across both the center and the state to make this journey happen. So that's another example which can be implemented.
Thank you. And I would like to go back to Tina. You spoke before about Mauritius and the climate vulnerability that it faces, but at the same time, it's a country that sits on vital maritime crossroads. So I would like to ask you, how can small island states take advantage of this situation and transform this strategic position into blue innovation, green job creation, and deeper partnerships also among regions and among countries?
Thank you for this question, which is very, very relevant. So I would like to cite the example of Mauritius on 3 different instances, where then we will explore the collaboration area. So first, I don't know how many of you heard or saw some years back, there was an oil spill which was called the Wakashu, the famous Wakashu oil spill, which where a vessel just accidentally got wrecked in the shores of Mauritius, and that was incidentally at the time in my constituency. So Mauritius, as I said earlier, is surrounded by the blue. The ocean is our pride and is our jewel. In my constituency, most of the livelihoods of the people come from the sea. So it was a shock to see from one day to the other the whole ocean, the whole sea, our lagoons, transforming from blue to black. And it was also a shock in terms of preparedness and how to go about to remedy the situation. So that's when we witnessed I would say, the magic of collaboration and of hands coming together to help and being united. And that's where I personally witnessed the beauty of unity. So from one day to the other, when this tragic accident happened, the next day everyone was on the sea, from children to fishermen's wives, to the government, to the NGO, to the professional sector. Everyone was wondering, how can we help? And I want to here acknowledge all the actors who helped in that scenario, especially the international scene and the countries like India, Japan, again, EU, UN, so many of them. And it would be wrong and unfair for me to just mention one and not mention the other. So I want to acknowledge here the efforts of everyone. So I want to say here that, for instance, we needed skippers, we needed divers with expertise who could go down and navigate through the oil. And that's when India sent the maritime security people and the trained people in that sector. We had the collaboration from the UN, and also for a long time the fishermen were jobless. So we had to come up with a kind of compensation scheme. And I will just with financing in a later part, but coming to the point I wanted to make on collaboration and unity. So I want you to imagine it like on the sea, the beach will be becoming all black, and everyone together, from the children to the fishermen to different people, just as we say, putting their boots, like we put yesterday to dance, but going on the beach to actually clean. No one knows exactly how much we can clean in a day or how much of the ocean would be clean, but everyone came together as a nation, and that was beautiful. And not just as a nation, we had representatives from different parts of the world coming over through the different embassies who showed by example, who led by example, and by showing that irrespective of titles or position, everyone came together to save the ocean. And I want to take this example further to say a second instance of what that accident showed us is that also there is an issue in terms of what I said earlier. We have such a large EEZ, but we do not have the appropriate resources to monitor effectively. For instance, there was a lack of surveillance and maybe surveillance tools, which indeed here, I must say that India is helping us with. Second thing, there is a lot of illegal fishing, and even that goes, a lot of fishing that go unreported, and even these things, on these grounds, I'm speaking about the specificities of SIDS and how collaboration can help make it easy from examples and cases I personally experienced. So first, if I talk about collaboration, for instance, I want to salute India for the amazing initiatives our friend Paras just mentioned, all these legislations, all these revamping. And I would say that these are transferable. Of course, there's not like a one-size-fits-all solution, but there are transferable lessons for many parts of the world, like for SIDS like us, and also areas of collaboration. So I would say, for instance, the Prime Minister of India's vision, Modi's vision for Sagar, which then became Mahasagar, which is his vision of 2030, is embedded in all these initiatives that you shared here. So why can't there be a proper collaboration? For instance, countries sitting on this panel, India, Mauritius, Kenya, South Africa, and I don't know, Greece. For instance, first, in skills transfer. Second, I would say, skills involves capacity building. Second, in terms of infrastructure. As I said earlier, being strategically located in the Cape of Good Hope and with what is happening in the Red Sea at the moment, there is such a high increase for bunkering services in Mauritius. However, we are underutilizing our capacity, not because of lack of will, but because of lack of resources and financing. So these are avenues for collaboration with India, with South Africa, and with other countries, of course. And apart from infrastructure and capacity building, I want to come to a very important point. While looking at the blue, we should not forget the green, which is what we just heard recently at the COP. And being a SIDS, it's very important, as I said earlier, to also look at this part. Like, I want to take the example of India investing, for instance, in hydrogen vessels and the other green time. Okay, so I'll just finish here. So I just want to say that maybe while we are trying to decarbonize this sector, there can be a lot of collaboration in that sense, so that, for instance, even if we are exploring or if there is mining, that this exploration comes with ethics, and like Samir said yesterday, that we don't forget our sense of purpose and of principles. Thank you.
I keep your last point about the skills and capacity building to go back to Nabisa and ask you about South Africa, which is strengthening its maritime skills ecosystem. And what capacities do you see as essential for South Africa to prioritize in order to fully participate in this blue economy that we are talking about?
Thank you very much for that question. I will focus on 3 or 4 points in that regard. Nancy has nicely provided an overview in terms of Africa, so it made my job very easy. The first element that I would like to talk about, which Nancy referred to under capacity building, was skills development. For South Africa, I think this collaboration with India would come in handy when it comes to a partnership. with domestic academic institutions to offer maritime qualifications. So we do have universities in the country that are offering marine sciences as well as seafaring qualifications. For instance, for seafaring, we've got 3 universities that are offering those qualifications, namely the Durban University of Technology, Cape Peninsula University of Technology, as well as Nelson Mandela University. So a partnership in terms of expanding our offering in that regard would be welcome. We've got other universities as well that are offering other qualifications beyond seafaring, because when you talk maritime, people always think it's all about seafaring, but it's broader than that. So we've got aquaculture as well. We've got University of Forte as well as Limpopo, offering aquaculture qualifications. We've got UCT doing marine robotics and Nelson Mandela, as well as UKZN, KwaZulu-Natal, looking at maritime law. So partnerships in that regard in establishing joint qualifications to expand the content as well, to expand our reach in that regard. And also India's strengths in vocational training are well recorded. I think it would be valuable for us to have a partnership in terms of capacitating our TVET colleges to offer maritime qualifications. We have 50 TVET colleges in the country. Out of that 50, there's 2.5, and I'll explain why I'm saying 2.5. We've got one in UKZN, Umfolozi, that is offering seafarer qualifications, and then one here in Cape Town, False Bay College, that's offering boat building. And I was saying a half with the Cape Town College of Cape Town, which is offering workshop training for seafaring. So we need to expand our offering in that regard when it comes to TVET. So that partnership would come in very handy. Another element would that be of exchange. Offering exchange programs for our lecturers and students to build the capacity to upskill them as well. Extend the scholarships as well. I know there are already scholarships that are already being offered to African students, but I don't think that is quite adequate. I think we should expand that as well. And I want to focus on this, the research capacity. We need to build or increase the pool of African researchers in the ocean sciences and maritime. That you can do by partnering through programs like emerging researchers programs that we currently have, maybe expand on that. A co-funding of research chairs at various universities. We've just, SAIMI, South African International Maritime Institute, we've just launched a new research chair in naval architecture and design. There are others, and I think about 6 in the Nelson Mandela University that look at shallow water, law of seas, and others. But we need there are other areas that we need to look at as well to actually expand our content in that regard. And another element would be the communities of practice, where there is a structure where universities, at various universities, industry, as well as government participate. And the nice thing about communities of practice is that various universities can participate. It's not only situated in one university like the research chair. So we can actually partner in that regard to actually boost our knowledge exchange and sharing, as well as generation, as well as build capacity for lecturers and students. Another area that's close to my heart, that's co-creation of research with indigenous communities, looking at maritime indigenous knowledge rather. So that's another area that we need to look at. And also your strengths in disaster resilience and climate change impacts. That's another area that you can possibly tap into in terms of expanding our capacity in that regard through our universities. And also, just to look at also the research element in terms of the research centers, establishing research hubs that focus on you've got technology that's got high impact solutions, looking at the cold chain, fish production from origin to consumer, the seaweed processing. I attended a forum some time ago in Japan, where we were informed that seaweed farming is very prevalent in Africa, especially one of the countries that was mentioned was Tanzania, which has got a big industry in seaweed, and which is driven by women. It's driven by women, so it's got a potential for inclusivity.
Yeah,
as well.
it seems like an upside to doing well is you get a lot of homework. So I'm going to make a list of everything that needs to be done. Maybe the next Cape Town conversation, you and I can confirm that it's done.
So much sea, so little time, I would say. And unfortunately, we don't have. We will continue with the questions in the break because we're out of time and we should be very strict. Do we have 2 minutes for a quick question?
Thank you, colleagues. Very concrete, I think, quick question. Pilani Mtembu from the Institute for Global Dialogue, which is associated with UNISA. So South Africa's National Development Plan identifies that piracy has basically been moving southwards from the Horn of Africa.
Please focus on the question.
And when it does, and what it recommends for South Africa's naval patrols to move from our oceans and move towards the Horn of Africa. So the question is for Nwabisa in terms of the implementation of that recommendation, increasing the area of naval patrols. How are we doing with that? And then for Nancy, if South Africa's Navy is looking to increase patrols towards the Horn of Africa, how would that be seen in Kenya?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. One more question? Yes.
Yes, thank you, panel. My question is actually following that question is about intra-African collaboration in terms of harnessing the marine. So, for example, we have how to fight illegal fishing in those countries. So we have Madagascar. I work in Madagascar, who is really facing a lot of illegal fishing. But we also have across the ocean Mozambique, who is facing the same issue. And I don't think that the two countries really come together to look at it. Also, we have the untapped potential of marine tourism, especially for Africans. When I do a quick search about the cruises to go and have a cruises in the Indian Ocean, I find that I have to go through a Western company, yet these are African countries. And then we have a lot of challenges that we face, like, for example, I will have to apply for many visas. So how are we facilitating intra-African marine tourism? Thank you.
30 seconds each. I know it is impossible. Starting with Tina.
Thank you. It's a very good question. I cannot speak on behalf of the Navy, but I'll speak from what I know. Yes, it's a very important question that you're raising, and it brings about the challenge that we're having as a country. I think in terms of availability of vessels to deal with the challenges that we're speaking about. You'll find out that maybe there's illegal fishing that is happening maybe on the east side, and the vessel, it will take such a long time for a vessel to get there. Hence, we are turning to technology right now to look at vessel monitoring systems. I spoke about marine robotics earlier on in terms of looking at tracking, addressing the issue of illegal fishing, the issue of identifying fish stock assessments, as well as the issue of climate change. So I get where you're coming from, but I cannot at this point respond to what the Navy is doing in that regard. But it's a serious challenge. Hence, now we are now turning to technology as well in terms of that area.
Okay, just to add, when piracy was at its peak, you recall, or in waters off the coast of Somalia, Kenyan armed forces actually did go and secure the port of Kismayu. So it's something that has been done. But I know that recently there is talk of an African Navy, and the architecture of it, should be finalized and give us the leverage in terms of information sharing, in terms of capacity building, and in terms of collaboration and using the resources together to work together to secure our continents, our oceans, and also ensure that the crimes at sea do not just go on unabated, and there is visibility and a clear will to work together towards that.
Paras, Tina, and we finish. Paras?
I had a tangential thought. The question wasn't related or relevant to India, but India has been very active working with our African friends in tackling piracy, armed conflicts in the Red Sea region. And as a citizen of India, I feel proud that we are able to do this in the best interest of our economic interest as well as for our partnership with Africa.
Thank you. I just want to bounce back on the last question by the lady. Right question. I would say that yes, we're here in this room to talk about collaboration, but how do we facilitate things? And that's when I think leadership matters. And that's why, again, I hailed President Mbeki for being here this evening, and for all the leaders who listen with empathy and who lead with courage, because the future for steering this new maritime frontier, I would say, is not just about announcing or announcement effect, as you said. It's about making it happen, and I believe it's about having maybe a new ethical framework based on exactly those principles of collaboration, but thrive over rivalry and competition, and to remember that we can only win together by collaboration and partnership.
Thank you very much. And I will close this session exactly as I started, with a reflection. Omer called the sea the wine dark mirror of fate. What we see in our seas today reflected is the choice we make. As you said, competition or cooperation, fragmentation or connection. The choice is ours. Thank you very much, and thank you, President Mbeki, for being with us today. Thank you.